Made sense.
Okay, good. We're up and running here. I just had a little bit of audio difficulty. We only started like a few minutes of the podcast, and I realized, oh, it's Jack's end's not recording, which is kind of a bit more important than just me talking, I think. So perfect. Anyway, yeah, this is the second episode. I just recorded one last time with Stonks, and I was just talking to Jack before about how I was a little bit maybe too casual last time. I was a little bit too far away from the mic at times, and so it was a real nightmare for me having to adjust some of the audio. Meanwhile, Stonks is like 1,000 interviews in, speaking into the microphone proper, like this deep, rich bass voice, and I'm like, okay, great. Like, don't even have to tweak his audio at all. Enough about me and Stonks. Jack, nice to talk with you right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I watched the first episode. Stance does have a great interview voice, so hopefully I can live up to the bar that he set.
Oh,
Um,
just such a standard. Like, didn't even move. Here I am, like taking like 8 sips of like water each second. Like, I mean, again, I still probably will this time, but I don't know if I can. Yeah, gotta
yeah,
gotta give him credit.
yeah. So I mean, before we realized we had an audio issue, we were chatting briefly about Finery, and sort of the origin story there, and it's kind of an interesting story. Roger, have you met Roger? I mean, I know you've kind of chatted with him on Finery before. I'm not sure
Yeah,
you've spoken to him
I've
really.
only just chatted through the finery so far, and in a brief conversation just through the DMs, just
Got
trying to
it.
set something up.
Okay. Well, I'm the COO at Finery. I'm a full-time dev right now, starting to move more towards the operations side of things. Roger is actually our CEO. And so Roger had this idea. Roger is the Harvard. I went to MIT at the time. Um, Roger basically had this idea for a social brokerage, or sorry, like a social, stock trading platform. Something you could collaborate with your friends, talk with your friends, sort of invest together. And we both kind of realized, independently, I was working with financial creators, really kind of trying to help them better monetize themselves, working a lot with a couple of Discords, different creators there. As we began building, or I was building like this one-off solutions for different creators. Roger was kind of having this idea. Roger was actually looking for someone to build out this idea that he had, and he went onto LinkedIn and he searched MIT software engineer because he was at Harvard, which
And
is right
roughly what
across,
year was this? Did this for take place?
about 2 years ago now, I
Okay,
would
yeah.
say. Yeah, about 2 years ago. And so Roger went on to LinkedIn, searched MIT software engineer. Mine was the first name that popped up. Just so happened that I was also kind of working in a similar space. He pitched me the idea. I loved it. I ended up joining, sort of a couple of weeks later, and we started building a very, very rough MVP. When we first started Finery, actually, it was just myself, him, and then another Harvard kid. Um, we originally were going for a better version of Wall Street Bets. We wanted it to be more forum based. If you've been on the platform now, you can see it's very Discord-esque. It's very live chat. But originally, we wanted it to be a better version of Reddit. We realized there's a lot of competitors there. There's a reason why Reddit doesn't work super well for stock conversations. We thought Discord did. And so we ended up pivoting after that. I then brought on another guy from my fraternity who ended up being our CTO. And we've just kind of been off to the races since. It's been about 2 years since I officially joined, I would say. But honestly, it's probably been about a year or so of hard heads down work where I would say we've actually, kind of been working on the idea.
Yeah.
It's been a ton of fun so far. Gotten to meet a lot of cool people.
And it's an awesome platform. Like you're saying, like there's limitations with Reddit and everything. Like sometimes that's like obviously even just how limited with the formatting and stuff is there. And then with Discord too, it's nice in the fact that it's like it all comes through like asynchronously, with all the information just flowing in. But you kind of want a little bit of a bit more added features in terms of like the stock metrics that you've had included with Finery, just different stuff with even the profiles, being able to see people's watch lists and all that. It does actually seem like you mentioned it was kind of tailored for the Wall Street Bets kind of crowd almost at Reddit to kind of utilize in a sense, because it's really got that fast-paced kind of feel to it. And then again, you can also just throw in a chart and and people can even also then just shadow each other and see what everyone's doing in the space at the time. So
Yeah, absolutely.
really
I
rich in
mean,
features and stuff.
yeah, like you said, Discord is an absolute engineering marvel. I'm continuously impressed by just how well built of a product it is. It is no small feat to make something that's that real time.
And just
You
to
know,
jump in again, like I've done like just similar web development stuff front end, and I know like just doing the web part of that, it is impressive. Like I mean, people who might not like know what's involved in doing that, like just to even get that done in that short amount of time. I'm assuming nowadays too, you can kind of leverage maybe different packages and stuff, and just kind of install certain components maybe to kind of speed up some of the process. But still, then each time you install someone else's thing, you have to kind of debug all their mess. And but what's been like put together so far, it's really impressive web app and an actual mobile app as well. So I just wanted to kind of just add to that as well. It's not even as though you're just sort of saying like, oh yeah, it's kind of impressive like how much they've done. Like I'm legitimately like, wow, this is a really well-developed platform, and just with all these features, just to get them all working without them then, interfering with each other too, right?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. It means a lot. It's super cool to have people like yourself on a platform that we've built, day in, day out, having conversations there, making connections there, like generating alpha there. Like that's why we built the platform. It's super cool to see. And you're one of our power users. Like I love seeing you on the platform every single day. I mean, yeah, like we're super happy with how far we've come, but we have a lot more to go. We have a lot more features that we want to roll out. We have a whole crypto NFT offering that we're pretty excited about. So a lot of cool things in the pipeline. It's just a matter of time, before we really feel that the platform is where we want it to be.
And then I know that from Finery, the part that I participate in, the forum and everything, is there also a component of Finery that is like similar to like a Robinhood type of thing, where you actually then like you sign up and you link your accounts and that's your brokerage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're Canadian.
Exactly. So I haven't been able to dive into these, but yeah.
Exactly. But we do at this point have a full US brokerage, exact same feature set as Robinhood. We haven't rolled out crypto yet, but we'll be able to buy about 25 different cryptos very, very shortly. But like myself, I don't have a Robinhood anymore. I use Finery. I buy and sell all my stocks on there. Directly in the chat, it's one click and then I can purchase. So if Stonks calls out something interesting, 2 clicks and then I now own it, which is a super cool feature. It's really what we wanted. It really kind of allows people to trade alongside each other and truly kind of, it's a little bit more of a social experience than I think anything else that we've seen so far.
Yeah. And it definitely feels like it's meant for like how the web's progressing and stuff. Like it's adding in features, and just like you're saying, it's catering to like the Wall Street bets kind of crowd, especially with the interactive, the charts and all that, and the watch list. It just, those features are great where they're just incorporated in the profile, but also you can then attach them into your post as well. So yeah, I like the whole thing right now. And like we're saying,
yeah, absolutely appreciate that.
It's really cool how you can just then go into Finery and actually be able to network with different people in different spaces too. Yeah, like I could like tell that Jack and you and like Roger and basically just have just come from different fields and stuff too. I just kind of just sense there's different attitude as well, because you have the finance background along with the tech background, along with now NFTs and crypto. So it's a good mix of all of them and stuff too. I like even just as I sort of smiled a bit when you referred to you're putting together the team sort of, and you said, oh, this Harvard kid or whatever. Just someone from Harvard or whatever. For me, it's really cool just to even be like talking from people who have gone to like MIT and Harvard and stuff, because it's like, oh, like these are really, especially from Canada, these are prestigious institutions in my mind at least. I'm sure maybe you guys going through it, you're like, oh, if you only knew what's it like here. But no, it's really cool just to like even just be talking with people who have basically are at the highest tiers of at least like from an organizational standpoint, where the space is. Because if someone potentially not to throw shade on any Canadian universities, but if a Canadian university was someone was maybe the exception of University of Toronto or a real tech-based university, but if they're putting together a Finery, I might be a bit more kind of not skeptical of its potential, but just sort of like, all right, is this going to be like, how limited is this going, especially within the Canadian, I guess, ecosystem, where sometimes we just get to a point and sell out to a US company and then it doesn't really move more forward from there. So so for me, just seeing it this perspective, I'm like, oh, cool. This is developed by, Harvard, MIT student grads. And they're basically, you're even in the right locations and stuff. You guys are, I guess I don't know the specifics, but between LA and New York and stuff, and these areas where all this sort of really kind of goes down and stuff in terms of the field and getting information and all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we had actually an intern join us last summer from University of Waterloo who was absolutely incredible. Actually,
Yeah.
I really loved working with them. Great school. But yeah, that is one of my favorite pieces about Finery is I come from a very tech heavy background. I was like really deep into crypto, have been for a while, and I approach it from like the technological standpoint. Whereas, Roger and some other people approach it more from like a, feel, perspective. And then Wall Street Stonks is very like trade heavy and just applying a lot of the fundamentals of stock analysis to NFTs. So we have a really great balance, of a bunch of different viewpoints. I was really skeptical about NFTs at first, honestly. I was early to crypto, but then I was actually really pretty late to NFTs just because I couldn't rationalize from like a tech standpoint why exactly like these things were taking off. But like that's the cool piece about Finery is that, Stonks and yourself, far more about NFTs than I do, just really kind of gave me a different perspective and consistently kind of give me a different viewpoint than just like this is a bad use case of this technology, right? It's far beyond that at this point.
Definitely. Yeah, there's like different ways you can be looking at NFTs and stuff for sure. I think when I first got like introduced to even sort of the idea of them, they weren't even I guess thrown to me as like NFTs. It was way back when they had like the crypto kitties, because that was sort of the whole pitch for Ethereum was like, yeah, Ethereum has these smart contracts. And then it was like, this was a big talk in 2018, 19. And it was like, oh, what are the smart contracts being used for? Oh, well, the biggest use right now, the biggest burning, is going towards these crypto kitties. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. I remember even trying to just explain Ethereum a bit to my brother at one point. I was like, yeah, and like he asked me what they were being used for. I'm like, well, it's this right now, but could be something later. This is just the start. But he's like, oh, okay, well, let me know when it's something more than crypto cats or whatever, right?
Right.
And
do you mind giving me 1 second?
Definitely.
Do you mind giving me 1 second? Someone's like,
yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. I'm back.
Oh, no, it's all good.
That was odd. I was in a conference room there, and like it's on our floor, and no one ever reserves them. This guy started banging on the door, saying he had reserved it, so I had to hop out of there real quick.
Gotcha. I was just gonna look to share a screen anyway. I was gonna bring up Finery in the background here while we talk. Might as well.
All right, cool.
Let's go to the stock section first.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem at all. Oh, whoops. All right. Got the little meme there. Yeah, so this is how the layout looks like for anyone who's not entirely familiar with the site just right now. Let me see if I can make this window a bit bigger.
Looks like I can only see the island.
It's showing my other screen now. That's funny because I changed the screen. So hold on, I need to move it. It's okay. I had to edit the part where you're out of the frame anyway, so we can just start it up when this gets here. Okay. Yeah, I'm also a Zoom novice, if you haven't really totally noticed.
It's very confusing to use with recording softwares. I totally feel that.
It's mostly, yeah, and at this point it's just Zoom because I'm like, okay, wait, where's the share menu? So I found it now. Okay, there we go. All right, you can see it now?
Yep, that's perfect.
Sweet. And we have our video on display as well, but I'm just seeing if I can enlarge this somehow. It's minimized, sort of more like these tiny thumbnail images, but oh, there we go, perfect. Yeah, I'm just
all right. We good?
Yeah, we're all good. All right. So anyway, yeah, I have the Finery brought up here now, just so you guys can have a look at it. We just have a little meme that Tim thrown in. I love Tim's contributions to Finery. He's such like a poet and just like not even just in everything, I guess, right? Like an artist, but also like really tech knowledgeable as well. It's funny because he'll play it off like he's almost not tech savvy, and then he'll get into something that's like involving packaging and like packages and all this stuff. It's just like, oh, okay, so you know more than most average people, but you play it like you need. Come on, Tim. Anyway.
Yeah, Tim's hilarious. I mean, he hangs out in there, and he also is a mod for a bunch of different Discord groups. I'm not sure if you were aware of that. But
yeah, he used the Colton Rain mod. I'm definitely aware of that one, but I wasn't sure if the other ones necessarily. I know there was.
Yeah, he mods for a couple of different groups, and so he has really interesting insights into a bunch of the different recent NFT projects, and actually is starting to facilitate a bunch of connections, between different groups. He set up Tiptoes actually with a whitelist for Colton Rain, and then vice versa. So really kind of starting to build out his network.
That's awesome. I feel actually as though Tim's probably doing it the right way, whereas like he's integrating himself with these projects like in Colton Rain. Probably, he's already gotten compensation for that as well, and then now just spinning that into the next thing. It's just it's cool just to see. Yeah, so this is the idea that with the watch list as well, and you can see just all these different features. Even I like how you obviously can add your own Twitter and stuff, so people can then follow people off platforms and get connected that way, then re-meet on Finery. Yeah,
absolutely. And it is nice to be able to view someone's positions. There's still, the brokerage is still a little bit buggy as it currently stands. We're getting those worked out. It'd be a pretty massive update coming, I would say, about a week or so from now. So pretty excited for that. And at that point, the broker should be a lot smoother. The mobile app, which I'm not really sure if you've used, it's going to get sort of a massive facelift.
Right. No, I do. I have been using the mobile app. It's nice, definitely on the go. Well, I can't use just from web anyhow. So and so with myself too, I'm still on really dated technology. I like the iPhone SE just because of form factor. Like it's really preference. I don't think anyone actually believes me when I say that. They probably always just think like, oh no, you. My dad
also has iPhone SE for that exact reason. So I get it.
Yeah. And then just the other day is funny. I'm sure you saw my little slip up in the Discord where like I was decided to be. I'll just basically be dumb. I'll just put it that way. I was like, oh, I got this like text spam link or whatever, and it was just a quick side story, I guess. Then ended up being one of these links that I knew it wasn't legit, but I was like, okay, if I just open in Chrome, I'll just get to see what it says and like just kind of laugh at it or whatever. And then it took me to a broken page, and then as soon as I don't know, just weird stuff started happening, and I didn't even like really see what the weird stuff was. I'm like, let's just shut everything down, pull out my SIM card, crap. And the end result of that was now I've actually just switched to a different phone. I'm not even maybe going to use that phone moving forward. I don't know. I'm going to take it to the Apple store, see if like I've already done a hard reset and everything, but just super paranoid. The one thing that was really getting to me was once I reset it and stuff, if I went to Chrome and tried to browse sites and stuff, it did seem to load slower than the other phone that I'm using. So I'm like, is it now taking my network and also doing crazy stuff with it? It's one of those. I think
from a tech finding out.
And the thing is too, I think from like a tech perspective is like, it's sort of like it's not even like a time is money thing, but it's like I can't invest this much time into thinking, or even just like every day having a phone if I don't know it's compromised. Like I can't do that. Like all right, well I'll figure this out later maybe. But yeah, that was dumb.
It is what it is. You live and you learn. But
that's those sort of things too. Sorry. You definitely live and learn. But that's one of those things where I go to Finery, then I'm like, is this the sort of thing I want to be sharing with an MIT grad that I was dumb enough to fall for like a 101 like security mistake? But I'm like, it's kind of a funny story. I'll just post it. Hopefully, don't think I'm too stupid. But yeah.
No, certainly. I read that as I was going home last night. It made me laugh. But quick aside, I'm actually not an MIT grad. I dropped out. After 2 years.
Getting into MIT, like that's already like. Don't even, but I it's fine if you want to qualify it more. But again, even dropping out, that's probably even maybe more of status to me now because you're like, I didn't want to spend the rest of my time there. I had other projects to get to, so that's cool.
Yeah, my mom doesn't let me use the word dropout. She's like, just taking a quick leave of absence.
Sure.
But I mean, it's all been for Finery. It's been a really great journey so far. But I kind of wanted to go back to the CryptoKitty stuff and kind of hear your origin story with NFTs because I was super interested.
Sure. Yeah. And I as I'm starting out this podcast, I realized I probably should make it so it's maybe not always just me necessarily interviewing someone, but I think it also to be dependent on how things are. Right now, even for the first couple shows, I kind of wanted to do it more free form where I don't necessarily have exact set questions because I'm sort of even just meeting you guys a bit more too. But but now going back to like my interest in like all that stuff with Ethereum and how it started out. That's how I first knew about Ethereum, and I kind of got into it and a little bit of Bitcoin in 2018. And then that was right when it kind of started to top and then it fell from there. So I got out. And then I was interested because I had Bitcoin, I had crypto. And I think I had it like since I bought back into the crypto scene around March 2020 or 2021. And then I would just sort of always I'm big into social media and stuff in general. Like I am sort of different. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. That's why I even have like a decent home setup for studio and stuff. Is because I just like technology because it kind of helps me to do different things. And then I just go down different rabbit holes with technology, social media and stuff. So one thing after I got into crypto is I was always listening to just different podcasts. This probably was maybe the main genesis was, I was listening to Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast, and I forget even what episode it would have been. And like Stonks, I listen sort of episode dependent. I don't even listen to him as much these days because there was a certain point where I first started, this is sort of a tangent of how I started listening to his show even, but before COVID, I sort of got into the show a bit. And it was sort of him after his YouTube phase, which was sort of interesting to see how that was all playing out. And then as COVID hit and he started to sort of continue his podcast, I did enjoy it, but it also kind of, at least towards the end of 2020, it sort of, it's starting to go in a different direction now. Because I feel like people who basically had a profession or whole career on YouTubing and stuff before COVID, they don't necessarily always transition the way you'd like them to in a COVID world, right? Before it was interesting because he's, I could sort of live vicariously through him a bit. Like, oh, look, he's going to these parties. He's doing all this fun stuff. He's inviting people over, doing all that. But now he's just someone who's just sort of doing the Joe Rogan model a bit, which is cool. But it's just, okay, I don't really care if you're not going out in LA and doing all these things and networking with YouTubers and stuff. But there was a point in time where I'd listen to more of his stuff. And what usually happens with me and getting into anything is I'm sort of similar vibe maybe to you, where I'm pretty skeptical of all these stuff, or I'm not immediately drawn into them. But then I just see it so much, like I basically get exposed to it so much to the point where I'm like, okay, I just feel dumb because I'm usually interested in just seeing what happens with these things, even if I'm not going to invest. And then you follow it enough to where you're like, oh, I've been watching this for 4 days now, not investing because I wasn't going to invest, but if I see it every day now increasing, like this floor price, right? And I have crypto, and like everything else wasn't really moving. Like stocks at that point weren't really moving. Bitcoin had kind of stalled out a bit, and I didn't really need it to pump, but it was just sort of not doing anything. So it's just one of those situations where I would go to OpenSea, I would see sort of Logan Paul's trading history, and that was a big eye opener for me too, is because I could actually see what he was getting. Because sometimes I know they can have multiple accounts, but it was still pretty clear that he was mostly only buying into the ones he was promoting on his OpenSea.
Right.
And that was just a big thing for me, because I was thinking like, oh, they can't really disguise that what they're buying, because they could claim that they're buying something and not, but I actually can see it, and I can actually see when they've sold it. So that added bit of information was just really appealing to me, and it just got to a point where I saw some of these trends where I saw him buy into something and then it pick up. Because I think it was probably even like the second podcast he did on NFTs where I was like, oh, I remember him talking. Actually, what I think maybe the kernel was, it might have even been CryptoPunks, because he was talking about CryptoPunks probably at the start of 2020 and this was with him and Gary Vee and stuff, because he was saying, yeah, Gary Vee told me to buy some, and at the time I remember him buying those CryptoPunks, and I was thinking like, wow, he just dropped like $5,000 on one of these. And I was looking at the Larva Labs website, and I was like, huh. And if you go into the Larva Labs website, I'll bring it up now. Might as well, whatever.
Is it still active, even though Bored Apes just bought them?
Oh yeah, I think so. Because how it works is like Bored Apes, they just sell all theirs on OpenSea anyway, right? So it's like they're not even really getting a percentage. So it's like it's not like they really have a really allegiance to or any reason to get off Larva Labs, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
That's an interesting thing I've always thought too, is how Bored Apes, they stay on OpenSea, and OpenSea just keeps getting the 2% of their commission. But I guess it's sort of a mutual relationship because they get so much exposure from OpenSea, so maybe that's why they do it.
Yeah, I mean, I also just think that the Bored Ape guys, they're not really technologists. They were software engineers, but it just seemed like they created this kind of consumer brand and got picked up by celebs. So they haven't really innovated. in the same way that, someone like CyberCons has. But it is interesting because I also look at like CyberCons who definitely have the bandwidth, and they still haven't built a marketplace. Marketplaces are difficult, and they're also very difficult to be secure. And so I imagine Bored Ape just doesn't want that liability, if I had to guess.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, liability, and just, I guess you wouldn't. Yeah, right. And I think it's also too, you have to draw people over to that space. I think with Larva Labs, like, it happened to work out because maybe they even preceded OpenSea to some degree. Maybe their site did, so people kind of knew about it. But I remember browsing this site before when like Logan Paul first talked about it, and I was like, people are buying these. I remember clicking on one, and like it just seemed sort of confusing at how you'd even buy one, because if you go to click on one of these, you go and just look at the formatting of it too, right? It's this HTML like table kind of layout, and you're like, okay, like this is cool, but you can see like offers and whatever. And I almost didn't really see a huge potential in NFTs just sort of looking at this, because I thought, oh, if this is what's gonna be, like this is the marketplace, or this is the setup for how it goes, is people have to kind of go to these cryptic sites and then, look at it this way. And then I remember him bringing up later, like, well, by the way, those CryptoPunks I bought into like months before, yeah, now they're worth this much, and I'm buying into these other projects. And so I was like, okay, wait, what's going on here? Yeah. And then that's when I also made the call to decide to go for Incognito versus World of Women, because World of Women was going to take like all my Ethereum at the time. And like, yeah, but it's like, I wouldn't have been able to pull the trigger on the World of Women at that point, because like we're getting into like a new thing. Like you're saying, like if you don't even really believe in it, how am I going to drop like $4,000 on something that I'm only somewhat certain about the space,
Yeah.
So that, and I also saw people buying it for much cheaper in the history, right? Like before it was at one point, whatever Ethereum, people had bought in at, 0.1 or something. So I thought, okay, and maybe I'm buying their top, I guess. So
I mean, that is always the question, right? I mean, Stonks and I ended up buying the top on CyberCon babies, like pretty close to the top, and then they kind of cratered down to 5 ETH or so. And now they're heading back up. But no, that was definitely my biggest NFT purchase. I got into, so I mean, I've been working with, all NFTs, or most NFTs are stored on this thing called IPFS. Have you heard of IPFS?
Yep.
Yeah, so like it's a really interesting data store. I was working on it my freshman year at MIT. We were building like a distributed database for musicians, basically storing the actual like files as NFTs essentially, or what would become NFTs for verification and sort of like for licensing rights. So you could use any of these songs, or like, they were basically like beats. Use any of these beats in your music. That was fine. You didn't have to pay a royalty like on chain directly backwards. It ended up not really working out for us, just because we were actually interviewing at Y Combinator at the time. It was actually going to be in the same batch as OpenSea actually. And they were just not bullish on NFTs at the time. And this was back in 2019. And so I was like, these guys are super smart. Maybe they're not, maybe they know better than I do. And I just kind of left it alone. And then started working on Finery again. Didn't really pay attention to NFTs, but then one day Roger walked into the office and he was like, I just picked up this really cool Solana NFT. Let me take, let's look at this together. Started really pitching it. I have been a huge fan of Solana for a while now. Was really early to it. Just really believe in like the technology, like the fact that it's like a consumer blockchain. It's a very, very well built in terms of that it's centralized in some ways, decentralized in others. And so you sacrifice some sort of decentralization, but for the sake of speed. Anyway, Roger pitched it to me. Yeah, exactly. He pitched it to me, and as these robots, they're called Solarians. We've talked about it several times. And basically they were the first generative collection on Solana. And so really what it came down to for me was like looking at CryptoPunks, like, okay, that was like one of the really kind of the OG collections on Ethereum. Here's the OG collection on Solana. I'm going to buy into it. I'm just going to hold it. Really kind of believed in it just because it made sense to me that Solana would start picking up, for NFTs, just because it's a far better user experience. What I didn't take into account was just like how irrational the space is, and the fact that people will be flipping NFTs and will just wear 30% like basically take 30% hits from the gas, the transaction fees. Like, it's a very irrational market. And so that was really something that like I just couldn't understand. But like, it was a massive miscalculation. I think my Solarians are down I don't even know what the floor is at this point, but like they're basically like, out of existence now. But that was kind of my first endeavor actually into NFTs.
Yeah, that thing absolutely happened too, where it's like you just picked the wrong horse and you're like, how did I not like my logic was just the same as if I picked the other one, baby, but like how did
Hmm.
that not play out? That is frustrating. And yeah, I think with Solana, I'm sort of interested now to sort of learn a bit more and get more like interest. I'm kind of still curious a bit more about the space now at this stage. I feel like because I'm actually so in depth in ETH NFTs at this point that it's almost a bad look at this point that I don't know enough about Solana at all and their like marketplaces and stuff, because there are people who are trading well on them, and I might even like the space more because I find with a lot of my trades, I could probably make a decent profit on most all of these flips if I just didn't have to account for, like you're saying, the gas or the royalties. Even when recently, the Mint Pass thing that I picked up, I bought it with tax. It came to like, what was it, 0.31
Hmm.
Ethereum. I sold it for 0.369, why not?
Right.
And I actually, with that, like selling, I sold it, like I flipped it above, like 0.05 above, and I still lost 0.02 or 1 Ethereum from that transaction because the gas and then the royalties on the back end. So if I at least got the gas covered, I probably would have been fine. But yeah, then the royalties got me with that extra like 10% total or something, which is annoying. But I know with Solana, it's just, yeah, you don't have to worry about these margins at all, which would be really nice, especially because I can kind of predict when things will at least pump a little bit. But it's like, oh, if I
Hmm.
need them to get like these huge margins, that's why Ethereum too, when you're doing these mint flip plays, make sure to talk more into my mic. You want to make sure that like you almost mint more than one at times because you just need to cover your margins a lot of the times. It's like, okay, well, I'm up 0.03, but if I even sell both these, I'm only going to get like, whatever. So yeah, the Ethereum market is pretty irrational. I think from people who just getting into the space, like even myself, we just always see it as like a tax or a premium that you pay. So it's not even like you don't even really see it as like an added fee because I guess you internalize it as like everyone else is paying it. So like it's just the cost. Like even when you're going to buy it, like initially you're like, oh, no one else paid more than I did for this. They paid the exact same that I did. So if they're gonna have to sell it, they're also gonna have to sell it higher up to get their money back, right? I know they're gonna take losses later anyway. That's a whole different topic. But
Hmm.
that's why I always thought it was like at least it adds a little bit of a premium to that sale later. If they
Yeah.
but yeah, I noticed that too. What you were saying about how you didn't expect people just to. Well, actually, you were saying you didn't expect people to take all these percentage or gas hits. But my other
Hmm.
thought with just getting into the space is like, after a month or two being in it, I never expected people to take such big like losses on their NFTs when they went to sell them later, right? At least not like before it seemed like it was already dead. Some people were just getting out when you thought it was way too early to be like, dropping prices. But
That's the issue with a lot of the stuff that I see. There's a couple of things that I've noticed. One of the things, like, it's free to list on OpenSea, and but then you have to pay. Well, you have to initialize the collection, sure, but then you basically like it's gasless to actually, um, really kind of list your NFT. Then someone has to then buy it with gas. What's really interesting is that there's two factors at play. It's like one, once people have initialized it, they'll just list a bunch because it is, gasless. They enjoy like the gasless experience. But then two, you have a lot of novices who don't necessarily know how to like properly exit like in a liquid market.
is this, sorry,
Um,
Solana or Ethereum at this point?
this is Ethereum,
Okay,
sorry.
because you're saying that like that there wasn't much gas losses or was or something. But go on.
What I'm saying was that once you have actually set approval for all, which is the way that OpenSea works for your NFTs,
Right.
you then can list completely gasless
Although
there.
like for each
And
collection, you have to then like pay like 10-20 bucks just to list the first one. That's all. But like
yeah, exactly.
unless
You
the
just have to set.
contract is written a certain way where they don't have that incorporated, but usually it's not necessarily a security thing, but it's also if it's depending on what Ethereum contract, like the different ones, because there's different, more specifics about it, right?
Yeah, part of the ERC 7 like 21 like contract is the idea that you can basically give a another address approval to move your NFT. So actually, when you go onto OpenSea and you list it, and you say it's instead of like when you try to list it for the first time, it asks for set approval for all. And actually what you're doing at that place is you're giving OpenSea the permission to blindly move any NFT that's like any NFT in that collection in your wallet. And so like, it's something that people don't necessarily realize is like, we're in this great decentralized place where you like have centralized it in terms of like OpenSea and can now, has authority over, a lot of our NFTs.
And OpenSea, it is so centralized. If a collection ever gets kicked off of OpenSea, it's like dead in the water in a sense at that point. I mean, it can go over to Looks Rare, the other marketplace. But OpenSea literally makes or breaks collections. I guess a little side story, and you might even remember this saga a little bit. When they had the flipped Bored Apes that I got into, it was like the fake.
Yep.
That was a whole timeline, which is interesting because there was so much involved with that. So they had this copycat Bored Ape collection, which is the flipped copies, and now there's different versions of them. There's like the XO0X version, which OpenSea does allow on their platform. But anyway, so yeah, basically someone started a collection which is just the Bored Apes, but they flipped their images. Didn't change even the numbers, so you could even look up the rarities to see if it was like, oh, this is the rare Bored Ape or whatever. And the collection was on OpenSea for not 24 hours even, maybe like 10, 12 hours. And then it got kicked off. And then I was thinking like, okay, this is already going to be a risky collection to get into. But if it's anything like the crypto funks, the flipped crypto punks, it actually could have some potential. Like, it's still obviously really speculative, but there's something maybe there. And I saw like a lot of people in the Discord that were involved with it, they actually seem to be kind of passionate about it. If you go to the floor price today, it's still sitting at 0.05. So, and this is not an OpenSea. They've still got, So that's actually the price I got out at, because I was like, I don't know if this actually now at this point has legs. But then what happened is, so they got kicked off OpenSea. But then what really was a curveball with NFTs, you'll get so many curveballs that you won't see coming. But this was one. Someone else started up a secondary flipped Bored Ape collection. So they just copied the copy, and then they launched theirs on OpenSea. And then they started to get traction on OpenSea. But OpenSea didn't kick their collection off of OpenSea for at least 24 hours. So the flipped punks that I got into were just losing all this traction to the one on OpenSea. And then eventually they got kicked off of OpenSea too. So I was in this other collection thinking, okay, good, we're kind of level playing field now. But then they were allowed on Rarible. And Rarible, I don't think people really use that much at all now. But last year it was a lot more prominent. And then people were buying and selling the other collection on Rarible. But, the one I got into was kicked off of Rarible. So we were deplatformed that. And then we lost the advantage again to this other collection who was just getting more market sales on that platform. So they got, and just to give you perspective too for people listening, like these aren't a small volume sales. So the flip punks that I got into, in like one day, they brought in like 300,000, 300K, not 300K, 300 Ethereum, which is like basically $1 million in revenue for the flip one I got into. The copycat of the copycat that was imitating the other flip Bored Ape one, basically, they got like 2 million in revenue for their 48 hours of existence. Just people buying a flip JPEG. So these are really big, like expenditures basically going down. And I actually was so thrown off by all this that I actually even bought ended up buying two of the other collection, thinking like, okay, if this is the winner now, I don't like how this played out, but you know what? Like they got, it is what it is. It's like the first mover advantage or whatever. Like if they get the traction, they get it. And then what happened was they got kicked off of Rarible eventually, maybe a day or so later. So then, because literally they had no Discord or any kind of community going for them, the only reason that they were getting sales was because they were on these platforms. Once they got kicked off, they were actually the inferior collection to the one that I initially got into. Because the one I got into actually was planning to do their own marketplace. Oh, that's embarrassing. And doing all this stuff. So then theirs started to tank, and then just didn't have any aftermarket sales. So anyway, if you get deplatformed off of OpenSea, you basically just kind of go downhill. And I was still believing in the flip collection I had to some degree. I kind of lost faith in it at this point with all this copycat and nonsense going on. But then OpenSea allowed on another flip Bored Ape collection, or the XO Apes, which is just a Bored Ape but with a yellow backdrop, and they changed some of the features. So OpenSea just basically, I'll bring up that one actually because I might gotta get some. I should be getting visuals for this ones because these are actually all pretty good visual ones. So
So, I mean, these were like the original ape derivatives, right? Is that or like were there other ones that were coming out around this time?
so the one I got into with the flipped ape, it was called Pake. So Funky Ape Yacht Club. That was the first copy. This one here, Exo Apes, this was like the one that OpenSea now allows on their platform. So OpenSea lets this one exist. It's gotten over 5,000 Ethereum in sales. So over $15 million has been spent on this collection's volume. And just allowed to exist. They still get sales to this day because people just want to have a Bored Ape that doesn't cost as much as a Bored Ape. But yeah, the one I got into, I still have it. Let me see. Funky Ape.
That's so wild.
Yeah. So this is the one I got into, the Funky Ape Yacht Club. And so you can see floor price 0.05. So they're still hanging in there. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, considering that there's collections on OpenSea right now, like my Incognito, I can't even sell it for 0.03. This is impressive to still be at 0.05 when they're kicked off and all this stuff because they just have, they don't have much volume, but the fact that the volume is even like enough to
It's
keep
there
that.
at all.
Yeah, right. And then there's the other one, which is so we were the Funky Ape Yacht Club, and they were the other one that was the imposter was like Pake. Anyway, I don't even want to bring that one up, but it's just not really worth it. But the point is, once ours got kicked off, then OpenSea just led on the Exo Apes, and at that point, I just totally got out of Funky Ape because I was like, okay, OpenSea has allowed this collection to exist. No problem with it because look how much revenue it's giving them or whatever. And yeah, it was just sort of a curveball you don't expect with the space because you think, okay, if OpenSea blocks this one collection and Bored Apes are their number one collection on their platform, they're going to want to cater to them. They're going to want to kick off this imitator. Nope, they didn't. They let it happen. So anyway, that's just a side tangent. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, OpenSea is pretty understaffed as it currently stands. So it'll be interesting to see the way that their sort of policing process changes. They have a couple of safeguards in place now. They allow projects to claim entire URLs and then will like blacklist people from having like the same words in it. So you can't just like throw off, like they'll do like sort of like check on it and then like block off entire like domains now, which is definitely a step in the right direction. But kind of going back to what you were saying, if you get kicked off of OpenSea, it's really tough in the Ethereum space. I think that was one of the issues with Solana as well. And now that like the big thing with Solana was that there's like 10, when I was really looking at it, there's probably 5 main marketplaces. I think they've consolidated down to 3. I don't really check it that often, but there's like the Magic Eden, there's Digital Eyes, and there's one other one that I'm kind of forgetting. But then basically there's no centralized database. So some collections have really good liquidity on some marketplaces, and then others have really good on like you gotta be able to check all 3.
Yeah.
So guys in my fraternity built a aggregation marketplace where you can, it's called hyperspace.xyz for Solana, and it basically takes every single marketplace, puts them all into one. So it's basically becoming like the OpenSea of Solana, but it's still not like centralized enough to the point that it like there's any real liquidity for most of these collections. So it gets super frustrating, and like you'll see like the floor on one marketplace will be drastically lower than the floor on the other ones because they're so illiquid. It's just like it's sort of an issue. It'd be really interesting to see how Solana FTs move now that they're on OpenSea. I think it might be an interesting time to look into.
Is that the official? Today is actually the official day that's supposed to be onboarded onto OpenSea. Was that the announcement? I think someone posted on Finery too that it was today.
Yeah, and then I went on earlier and I didn't see anything. But I'll be really curious to see what happens. I mean, I know there's Solana Monkey Business, there's the Degen Ape Club, there's the Space Geckos, the Solana Space Geckos, which I think is like probably like one of the better collections on there. So there's a bunch of interesting ones to look into. And the thing about it is that the floor for the rarest collections was sitting around 50 Solana, 50 Sol.
Yeah.
When I was looking about a week ago, and this was when Sol was at like $100.
Right.
So they are drastically cheaper than Ethereum NFTs. You can really scoop up a lot of blue chips right now if you're actually bullish on, Solana NFTs. Now they're kind of entering the ecosystem.
Right. I I think that's the sort of the thing with Solana too. So like one thing I think what makes ETH more attractive is of course just it seems to be what the big brand or companies end up going with. If you're like a Nike or Adidas, you just don't tend to go to the Solana. But even if yeah, it even seems like a lot of influencers and stuff. I guess I might not just be as aware with influencers. There might be smaller ones, but it does seem like yeah, like there's just a really strong like lean towards that. But that would be probably the difference that I could see in the space that would get people in. The only Solana one I knew about, and this is just from like my childhood days or whatever, is like I know that the website like a Neopets, they actually relaunched their collection on Solana, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like maybe I just pick up one of those. And it's funny because like the one like animal species that I like the dragon one, that's like the most expensive one, of course. So I'm like, oh, okay. And it's like it's got some kind of whack designs, and I was just thinking like, oh, I actually own like I still have the Neopet, the actual one. Like I don't really need this thing. That's like not it. But that was actually something that I was thinking like, okay, at least Solana has like got them on board. But in some ways I was like, oh, if Neopets is on Ethereum though, that would actually be kind of cooler though. Then you know, maybe in sense, because then I could actually kind of maybe have it as my PFP on Twitter. That's another big part too, is just the integration with Twitter and stuff as well.
That'll change if they do, because Twitter goes to the OpenSea API. So
yeah,
maybe that'll change.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of potential once it gets onto OpenSea. I guess that's the main thing, because it's just maybe similar nowadays to like, are you listed on eBay or Amazon, sort of, right? That's why I even brought up that specific example when I think someone said like, oh, good, we got kicked off of OpenSea. Maybe it was the people in the Funky Apes or some other collection. And I was like, no, that just means like now you have to sell your NFT on like a Craigslist. Like, do you want that?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. No.
Like,
you just get way less traffic to it.
Yeah. And just and the traffic is everything, because it just basically gets the demand going. So I guess that boils down to like a whole different question with just like, because you brought up how it's cheaper on Solana and most of these collections are, but like why, like what, that seems to not obviously at least yet be the main appeal or draw. Of course it could change, as people, get more familiarized with NFTs and the space matures. But like right now, like how do you see people valuing NFTs then, especially because like, yeah, you took a while before you kind of got into it. But like, I think that's sort of the thing, is I think people try and maybe associate NFTs with something previously they're experienced to, or some sort of real world thing. I guess the obvious one is like a piece of art or something, right? There's a lot of times for, but that's where I think there's always like this disconnect between people who like, and how they value it. Cause it's always like people value on different things. If you're valuing it on the potential utility down the line, then actually you might pay off. That might pay off more than someone who's just short-sighted, thinking like they only like the look of it. But then someone who's short-sighted, who's only likes the look of it, might actually get out quicker than someone who's too attached to the fact that this project might have some utility or something that they don't like, not that they don't deliver on, but doesn't really bring value later or something. So I guess it's just about like knowing like, or having like trying to determine what is bringing people into the space right now. Is it purely an investment purchase, or is it also like, is it in any way sort of a collectible, like not collectible, but like, is anyone actually buying it for the art to display? Like, is that even a use case that's really relevant at this point? I don't know. Right. I guess it depends.
Yeah. I mean, there's a really interesting question. It'll be really interesting to see how the ecosystem ages, because I think the way that most people look at them is that they're chasing the next investment. Most people are just buying their NFT because they think that it's going to go up. I think that a lot of times people will find value in the community. I find a ton of value. Like, I'm holding my cybercoin at a loss. Like, I love being a part of that community. There's such great alpha on Wall Street cons. I win whitelists, et cetera, from it, right? Like, it does, like, there is like very tangible value to that. But for a lot of like these other NFTs, I think people just buy into them strictly because they think they're gonna be like the next big thing. It's interesting because like in the real world, like we put up with, like the Web3 space puts up with a lot of like low quality projects with like utility that doesn't really mean a whole lot. Like you pay astronomical, like for example, like your Bored Ape breakfast like
Oh
one,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
super cool,
Yeah, with the clams and stuff. Yeah.
right? Super cool NFT. It's super unique. But at the end of the day, right, it's a very, very expensive coffee club.
Mm.
Right. But like it's a super cool like thing to do and like you do it because like the novelty of it. But I'm like I personally am like very of the camp that I don't think like things like that are necessarily going to like scale like in the future. I think Bored Ape like Breakfast Club is a bad example because I think it's really well branded. I think it's really well done. I can definitely see that becoming like a thing. Well, I think you kind of get like the idea is that
No, then
just
that's like the
because you
most
take something
obvious example of like the utility or what you get like directly
right,
from it. And yeah, that with the board breakfast, there was different sort of appeals. That was even like right in January when other projects were really popping off. So it was sort of like,
mm-hmm.
oh, if these ones that barely have anything substance to it are getting like over 500 ETH in volume, this one can at least do that. And yet to this day, like it hasn't quite even gotten like, yeah, not even to 500 Ethereum, which is not even really like, I don't even necessarily blame it for it. I honestly don't really, like, it just never got any sort of hype. It's just odd because I'll look at other collections, even like the Women from Venus one, and they got like 1,200 Ethereum in volume transactions in their 1 week that they've existed so far. And it's like that, and the board breakfast one didn't even get like a quarter of that. But if they only got like half of what the Women from Venus did, they could probably fund their coffee thing for a little bit moving forward and do all this stuff to. So it's one of those things where like, yeah, you can be a little bit too like you can think too much about it and like and just like you can maybe better to kind of go with the vibe of like, oh, people aren't really rushing into this, so it's not going to take off. But it had so many elements to it that I really liked it. And in terms of the art too, I actually even bought another one because I wanted to have a third for the visual. So that one was just at the right like price point and everything that I could kind of like rationalize it in some way. But it was never really about the coffee. I just really liked the branding and the art. And I think the reason I liked it, it was actually done by like a company who was like a legit company, right? Like they actually had, you know, a brand design team. Like I noticed little details a lot on things, and they're probably not even little details, but like it seems like them in the space because like you're saying, like people don't always get as much out of the space as they should. But I go to their Discord and they have all these custom emojis and they're really well done. Their website is just, the graphics are really nice, the packaging's nice. They're doing regular Twitter posts. They're like regular announcements. They're actually doing everything right, and so I just kind of really respected that. But anyway, going back to what you're saying about, yeah, like they're not delivering value like these NFTs where like the price point to get into them, like the ones that are that gives you any kind of utility. Sometimes it's like, okay, it's like, yeah, you want the utility, well, you have to pay $3,000 just to get into this. It's like, well, like with the pre-mint pass too, like I like that pre-mint pass. There's 10,000 of them, but it's going for 0.3, it's like 0.38 now Ethereum,
which
is
$1,000,
yeah, over $1,000 just to get on a white list kind of privilege thing, which again, you don't even really know what it's going to deliver to you later, but it's just sort of in contrast to all the other projects. You're like, well, at least this one's offering something versus this other one. So yeah, we put such a premium on these collections, kind of undeservedly, just because. And then when they deliver any kind of real world utility, we're like, oh my gosh, great job, guys! Like you actually gave us something for. That's actually why I maybe do like the board breakfast too, because it's like, oh, I'm getting something physical now, like from this, you know, like not that I haven't gotten returns otherwise in Ethereum or, but it's just to actually get something that
it's
you're
very
like
tangible.
And it's totally reasonable that a project could do that. Cause like a lot of these ones, you buy into it for like $500, like can't like, 50 of that go to send me like some stickers or something even, like not that you'd want that. It's like, it's a different market or different people buying into it. Right.
But still, yeah. Things like that, like
some merch, like a t-shirt, that'd be kind of cool. Like imagine I had like a Dead Fellas t-shirt or something after buying like 3 Dead Friends or something. You just sent me like some, you know what I mean? Like it just,
and they're like,
do something.
It's just an interesting space. But like what I think is really interesting, and I have to go in about 5 or 10 minutes.
It's almost been an hour or so. Yeah.
But I mean, this has been great. One of the things I think is really interesting is something that's happening in DeFi right now. I'm not sure how like well versed you are in the space, how like closely you watch it, but 2017 there was this whole wave of ICOs, right? The developers made a killing up front. They made millions of dollars very quickly, very similar to the way that NFTs are working right now.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happens is that they made all their money up front, and they still basically have some sort of like they basically have to stay with the project and
Right.
keep
They can't
working on
just
it, even
leave
though
like
they've
their
already, yeah.
altcoin that they didn't believe in, but they got all this money from, right?
So like that's the thing that we're seeing right now. Like Sushi Swap, for example, like can't find developers because all their devs were paid up front. Most of them have vested and they're just gone. It'll be really, really interesting to see what happens to the NFT space in like 3 years when the only thing that is generating revenue for them is just volume. And it's if the volume doesn't continue to pump, which like it doesn't, it's not for a lot of collections, the money won't be nearly the same for a lot of devs. So it'll be really interesting to see what they, what they do because the economics of the entire space have to change. So that's
Yeah.
like I think the biggest question. And I think that's why consistency and just like long-term innovation are the two things that I value because I think that that's really the collections that'll have staying power
Mm.
are the two that do that. Yes, of course, a lot of the blue chips will have staying power because of their name. Like Bored Ape will always be a staple. But what I do think is super interesting is the fact that like CyberCons has just continued to innovate and continue to push it and really hasn't done anything like cash grabby and as gets far less volume than all of the other collections, but continues to innovate even more. And that's like the main reason why I'm super bullish on it.
Right. I had different thoughts as you were speaking there. And then I think that's the one thing is you can't really predict or know how the space is going to evolve completely too. Like I definitely see like what you're saying where it's like I see a lot of these projects are just not going to make it. They're going to die off and then they'll get replaced. And then ones that are consistent will hang around. And that's what the projects that I am usually always most bullish on or interested in getting into is if the person behind the project, I know they're going to be in the space for a while. So it's like,
Right.
that's why people who invest in something with Gary Vee, they're really bullish on his stuff because he'll be on Twitter, he'll be on the Discord, he'll be just he's there. So I guess part of it is like, oh, you want to have someone to take the fall if things go wrong, but it's just also just seeing someone's presence. Like if someone hangs out there that they actually
Care.
yeah,
It's not just a cash grab for them.
yeah, and it's not like I care. Like you could like it's or that they're doing the work or whatever it is, right? Like I feel like care is like it's the right word, but it's also like I don't care if like they actually give a shit as long as they're doing the work. But I know that they like the space, and it's just that it's them. Like that's
Yeah,
who
they
they
have some sort of
are.
sense of responsibility. Out,
Yeah, it's like it's part of their image or their brand or
whatever.
whatever, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that sort of attachment is bigger than other stuff. And then there's other things that make you bullish, which is like if a big company gets into the space, like a Nike or someone, because they don't have a reason to really rug pull people because it's like
They can't. It's their brand. Yeah.
right. So it's just all about maybe it comes down to liability more than about like how much like passion they have. It's just about okay, who if things go wrong, like who like I at least want someone to like to feel this other than just the investors part because then there's actually could be repercussions sort of. But I think with NFTs you just don't know how it's going to evolve and stuff and what it'll transform into. Hopefully it doesn't like remain too much the same where it's just profile pictures and some limited utility and talk about metaverses that don't really actualize or materialize. But I think that like when more things outside of the NFT space maybe start incorporating NFTs, in terms of you can log into the site or something using like your NFT that you bought or, I think people always talk about like gaming stuff. If you could buy like,
Yeah. I mean, I think the way that my favorite
Call of Duty
something I reference
stuff.
all the time is by Peter Thiel, and it's we were promised flying cars, but instead we got 140 characters. Have you heard that quote before? Yeah, it's basically like referencing the fact.
Yeah.
Have you heard that one?
If not that, I heard like he always talks with Eric is it Eric Weinstein or is that the guy or you know what I mean? Or, yeah, it's he's another guy who's a mathematician, but they always talk about just how
Yeah.
like how basically things haven't really progressed or whatever. Or he kind of critiques like the American home being like, oh, houses like they're still designed the same way they were 50 years ago or something. I don't know, but that kind of relates sort of what you're saying with Peter Thiel's quote about like the future and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, really, the way that I look at it is like, in order to, like, first, like, we have to hit the low-hanging fruit. We have to build a lot of these, like, flashy consumer apps before we can dive into the substance of it. I think the exact same thing is happening in the NFT space just on a much faster, more extreme scale, right? We have to get through the profile pictures and the, useless utility collections before we really can kind of dive into, what NFTs are at their core. Because at their core, that's a super interesting technology. It's verified ownership, right? It's, a decentralized club. There's a lot of really amazing ways that the technology can be leveraged. We just haven't seen that many great examples of it.
And the PFP stuff, it's actually a really good like seed funding like phase of the NFT space, because it's
Absolutely.
like that's why I do like about it, or see promise in it, in terms of how it'll evolve, is not only will it innovate and stuff, but then it's also leveraging a decentralized currency, essentially like Ethereum, to then like help it fuel itself and grow along with it. My always theory with Bitcoin and like Ethereum and stuff is that the reason that it'll almost take over in terms of traditional currencies and stuff at some point is it's a system that's fueling itself. Like it's paying off world governments. It's kind of doing all this because the people who are supporting it are sort of pushing for it, and then they can kind of earn the rewards for it. But like it's a better system. So it's like the fiat system was a great system, and it still kind of will continue on, even probably with crypto to some degree, like because you could exchange your crypto into fiat or something, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
But crypto in theory ultimately could just be so efficient and so well executed and so well adopted by everyone that it just basically evolves and eats out the competition like it's some sort of monster that just grows on its own, kind of, right? That's sort of my abstract look at the space. So I think with NFTs, they'll just kind of work with it a bit, and then there'll be that merging like culture and art and everything, right? But
yeah, I mean, really at the end of the day, right, like an ERC20 token and an ER721 are really very, very similar. They just have a couple of different default functions, but at the end of the day, they're both tokens. They can be used as such. It's just one is fungible and the other one is non-fungible. But
and we'll definitely have another conversation later about like some of the specifics of stuff and with technology specifically, because I'm thinking with Finery, I like to put like a ranking of like who has the most tech knowledge. I'd say you have probably like the top high end, or maybe like I'm just specifically good with front end web stuff, but like you have actually like the back end and all this Ethereum knowledge and sites with contracts. And then somewhere below you is like me and Tim, but I think Tim has like a different skill set, so I'm not really sure.
Definitely.
And then I'm not sure where Roger sits, because I don't really know Roger too well. And then I feel like Stonks has like a bit more than the average person, because he's just in the space a lot and he's obviously got a good tech setup and stuff. But yeah, it's just funny. You can see sort of like the degrees, but I'm like, oh, okay, Jack's got a good tech understanding. He seems to have a good financial understanding, and also like, yeah, just like, okay, cool. It's nice when I can kind of get something feedback from you on stuff, or even just, especially with the contracts and everything too, because it's just an extra bit of vetting. That's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly a useful skill to know how to write and read contracts. Something I haven't used that much, that often, but it's definitely been interesting. I was the dev for a couple of projects that Stonks was involved in, just because I was trying to. I used to code a bunch of Solidity and wanted to get back into it for the stuff we're doing at Finery. So I figured the best way to do it was just be a dev for one of these projects. It was a super cool experience, but and
then you even like can take place in the launch and stuff, and get to
ton of fun, learn a little bit more of the intricacies of what happens behind the scenes, how the sausage gets made.
Right. I know, it's until you're into it, you don't 100% know. But anyway, I know that you do some limited time. So this has been great recording so far. I think halfway through the episode, I kind of lost a bit of my professionalism in terms of being close to the mic and all that stuff. But we'll deal with that another day. But this has been, the second Buoy episode. Jack, great to have you on. I didn't even get Stonks a chance to plug last time or anything. I think your screen froze briefly. That's okay. Oh, no, you're back. But yeah, you're obviously present on Finery. Anywhere else you want people to check you out at, or anything else you want to mention before you go?
Yeah, I mean, come talk to Buoy and I on Finery. We'll be launching our new and improved mobile app probably within the next week or so, and then really kind of starting to push more influencers, more Discord groups, really starting to push people towards our brokerage. So, I would say the actual public launch of Finery is coming up in the next 2 weeks. I'd love to have anyone who's watching this come check out the platform, generate some alpha in there with us. It's been a ton of fun. But Buoy, this was awesome. We'll definitely have to do this again. I really want to do the you, me, and Stonks all bring in a different NFT project. We pitch, each one of us pitches our own. We kind of go around the table because we do all have very interesting viewpoints. And that'd be a super fun series to take on next.
100%, like some sort of a weekly or even like monthly recap or whatever, right? Just because, again, last time I was talking with him too, I ended the recording and I kept talking with him for a couple minutes. And I'm like, wait, I gotta stop because I'm just gonna keep talking with you now if we just keep going,
exactly.
right? So yeah, there's so much I could kind of go over, especially just because you guys have like just depths of understanding compared to some other people who kind of only have like a surface level understanding. And yeah, so this would be great to do it again. So perfect. And yeah,
Absolutely,
definitely check them
Buoy.
out on Finery. Come visit us on Finery. It's our section where we discuss all the alpha and get set up too. It can be your financial platform. So enjoy it and come visit us. All right.
Absolutely, Bowie. I really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Perfect. All right. Well, great talking with you. And I'll check in with you guys probably next week. I'm going to do this as like a weekly thing, I think, now, at least to get in the rhythm of it. So enjoy. Cheers.